It's kind of mind-blowing when you hear the numbers. Like, over half of people in the U.S., maybe 55%, agree with at least one conspiracy theory.
Yeah, it's really quite something. It shows it's not just a fringe thing.
Not at all. It seems like it's a pretty significant part of how we make sense of the world.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is how these kinds of ideas pop up everywhere.
Yeah.
History, science, politics.
Right. So that's what we're doing today in this deep dive, really trying to get under the hood of this whole conspiracy theory phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
We've looked at some really interesting research that explores, why these ideas catch on, how they travel, and the kind of impact they have.
And the sources, they come at it from different angles, don't they?
Yeah.
Not just psychology, but also history, politics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we get a fuller picture.
Right. Looking at the historical background, the political uses, their real-world effects. It's all interconnected.
And you, listening right now, you've almost certainly bumped into conspiracy theories. Maybe you wondered why they stick around or, what the appeal is.
Mm-hmm. It's a common experience.
So our aim here is to take all this research, all these complex ideas, and sort of unpack them, make it clear, make it digestible, without it feeling overwhelming.
Yeah, move past just dismissing them out of hand and actually explore the nuances. Why do they resonate?
Okay, let's dive in. To start, what is a conspiracy theory, fundamentally?
Okay, so at its core, it's basically an explanation for something, an event, usually that says it was caused by the secret actions of a small, powerful group.
Secret actions, powerful group, got it.
Yeah, secrecy and deliberate coordination are kind of the key ingredients.
But the term itself, conspiracy theory, it feels a bit loaded sometimes.
Yeah.
Like using the label is a way to just dismiss an idea.
That's a really important point, yeah. Some argue it is used that way as a pejorative, a way to shut down alternative views without really engaging with them.
Right.
And there's a risk there, isn't there? If you label everything a conspiracy theory too quickly, well, the research suggests you might lower your guard against actual conspiracies, real abuses of power. So overuse kind of weakens its meaning when something genuinely shady is happening.
Exactly. But then you've got like a more philosophical take.
Okay.
Which is basically treat them like any other theory. Look at the arguments, look at the evidence, don't just dismiss them based on the label.
Makes sense.
But, and this is the tricky part, that same perspective admits it's really hard to definitively prove or disprove something that, by its nature, involves secrets. How do you find conclusive evidence of something hidden?
Yeah, that's the inherent challenge, isn't it? And what about this idea of official stories? How do conspiracy theories fit in with those?
Ah, yes. Very often, they emerge as direct challenges to the official story.
The Main Street explanation.
Exactly. The narrative put out by governments or institutions or whoever is seen as being in charge. Conspiracy theories essentially say, that official story, it's wrong, maybe even deliberately deceptive.
So they function as counter-narratives.
Precisely. Often suggesting the authorities themselves are part of the cover-up.
Okay, so this impulse to question the official line, that's not new. Suspecting hidden plots. That goes way back, right? Even if the specific term conspiracy theory is more recent.
That's right. The suspicion itself is ancient. But the term, yeah, the historical research shows conspiracy theory starting to pop up in U.S. newspapers back in the 19th century.
That early.
And interestingly, its early uses were often tied to specific scandals, like the Beecher Tilton affair. Big scandal, adultery accusations.
Vaguely remember hearing about it.
Well, the term was used then to describe claims that seemed really speculative, subjective, almost like saying, this is just their suspicious interpretation.
So labeling it as maybe unreliable from the get-go.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
But then you also see it used a bit differently, say, around the Garfield assassination.
Okay.
There, conspiracy theory wasn't just about speculation, it was about the actual suspicion that the assassin didn't act alone, that there might be a wider plot, even though he seemed mentally unstable.
So more like a potential line of investigation, a hidden network.
Exactly. It carried a bit more forensic weight in that context, suggesting possible hidden complicity.
Fascinating how the use evolved. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. The psychology. Why do people actually believe these things?
Right. Well, early on, a lot of the psychological research focused on individual differences.
Like personality traits.
Yeah, exactly. Things like how trusting someone is generally, agreeableness, openness to experience, even things like paranoia or having unusual experiences. The thinking was maybe certain personalities are just more predisposed.
So it was all seen as being about the individual's mind.
That was the initial focus, yeah. But later research really broadened out. It started looking at situational factors too,
Like what?
like feeling a lack of control. That seems to be a big one.
Lack of control over your life or events.
Exactly. When people feel powerless or like things are just chaotic and random, they might be more likely to see patterns where there aren't any. And perceiving a conspiracy can paradoxically give a sense of order. It explains the chaos. It might be a sinister order, but it's still an explanation, you know?
Right.
It offers certainty.
That makes a strange kind of sense. Even a negative explanation feels better than no explanation at all sometimes.
Right. It provides what psychologists call cognitive closure, even if the explanation itself isn't, well, accurate.
And this connects to conspiracy rumor psychology. I saw that mentioned.
Yeah, that's related.
Yeah.
It basically views conspiracy theories as a specific type of rumor.
Oh, okay.
So not all rumors are conspiracy theories, but these ones have those specific elements, secret plots, powerful groups acting maliciously. It taps into those deeper anxieties we talked about.
And is there also an idea that these beliefs might actually do something for the believer, like serve a purpose?
Yes, some perspectives talk about the functional nature of these beliefs.
Functional how?
Well, the idea is that being hypervigilant, being suspicious, it could be seen as a kind of defense mechanism.
Against being tricked or harmed.
Potentially, yeah. Like a better safe than sorry approach applied to social situations, even if that suspicion isn't always warranted.
Okay, that adds another layer. Now, let's bring politics into it. There was this blunt phrase in the research: conspiracy theories are for losers. What's behind that idea?
It's definitely provocative language,
Yeah.
but it points to this observation that conspiracy theories often gain traction among groups who feel left out, marginalized, maybe on the losing side of political fights.
So it's a way for those feeling powerless to explain their situation?
That's the argument. It provides a narrative. We're not in charge because of this hidden plot against us.
Yeah.
It can be a way to understand and maybe even fight back against perceived disadvantage.
Right. And you definitely see this play out in partisan politics, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. The research really highlights how existing political divides, fear, actual events, they all create fertile ground.
And it happens on both sides.
For sure. The examples are, there are Democrats suspecting Russian hacking of voting machines, Republicans pushing the Seth Rich WikiLeaks story. Partisan loyalty can really fuel this kind of thinking.
It seems like politicians themselves get caught up in this too. How do they handle it when their supporters believe these things?
That's a really tricky position for them, isn't it?
Seems like it.
Representatives might feel they need to acknowledge these fears to stay connected to their base, but then are they just listening, or are they, actively encouraging or exploiting those suspicions for political advantage? It's a fine line.
A difficult balance. And what about conspiracy theories as a disruptive innovation? That sounds intriguing.
Yeah, that's looking at it from a political science angle.
Okay.
The idea is that for groups out of power, conspiracy theories can be a tool, a way to bypass the usual channels, mainstream media, established institutions, and grab public attention directly, often by hitting on really powerful basic themes. Things like sex, corruption, betrayal. Those kinds of archetypal stories grab attention and stir up strong emotions. They can mobilize people quickly.
Okay, so we understand more about why people believe in the political context, but how do these theories actually spread? Is it really all down to the internet? Just herd mentality?
That's the common narrative, right? Blame the internet.
Pretty much.
But the research suggests it's a bit more complicated than that. The internet plays a role, obviously, but it's not the sole cause, and the herd model doesn't capture everything.
So what else is going on? What are the key mechanisms?
One really important one seems to be the follow the leader idea.
Meaning
People often decide what to believe based on cues from opinion leaders they already trust and agree with ideologically.
So it's not necessarily about weighing the evidence yourself?
Not always, no. It might be more about, does this person I respect, who thinks like me, believe this? Okay, then maybe I should too.
Trusting the source because they're on your team.
Exactly. That ideological alignment can be incredibly powerful. The perceived credibility of the source within your own group can sometimes outweigh an objective look at the actual arguments.
That makes a lot of sense. We trust people like us. Okay, let's look at some specific examples. Science denial comes up a lot. Things like GM foods, Climate change.
Yeah, those are really revealing cases. You see this deep distrust of scientific institutions, government bodies.
So with GM foods, it's like accusations against big companies.
Right. Often targeting corporations like Monsanto, claiming they're hiding health risks, manipulating research, controlling regulators, that kind of thing.
And climate change denial.
Similar pattern. Often framed as a huge hoax by scientists, maybe to get grant money or push some hidden agenda. The common thread is rejecting the scientific consensus when it clashes with other beliefs or affiliations.
It's a selective rejection of science.
Exactly. And the anti-vaccine movement fits right in there too, doesn't it?
Seems like it, that deep distrust again.
Absolutely. You know, fueled by things like that retracted Wakefield study.
Right, the autism link that was disproven.
Yes. But the conspiracy narrative persists that health officials, pharma companies, they're hiding the real dangers of vaccines. It shows how powerful these narratives are, even against overwhelming evidence.
And we can't really talk about this without mentioning some classic historical cases. JFK assassination theories, those are everywhere.
Oh, definitely. That's maybe the quintessential example in the U.S. For decades, a huge chunk of the public has believed it wasn't just a lone gunman.
And Oswald being shot later just fueled it more.
Exactly. It's a perfect storm for generating persistent, varied conspiracy theories after a major trauma.
The research didn't just stick to the U.S., though. It looked internationally, too. Any striking examples there?
Yeah, the international cases really show how local context, history, politics shapes these theories.
Like in Turkey.
In Turkey, there's often this strong suspicion of outsiders, external forces, meddling. And conspiracy theories have been used, sometimes quite openly by politicians, to explain events or even justify crackdowns. And after the Fukushima disaster in Japan, you had theories downplaying the danger, but also researchers investigating it facing harassment, threats. Really nasty stuff, fueled by conspiracy claims.
That's intense. What about elsewhere?
Well, in Poland, the Smolensk plane crash, which killed many top leaders, generated theories rooted in deep historical suspicions, particularly towards Russia. Some researchers even talk about a collective conspiracy mentality there.
And Russia itself.
Russia has its own long history, often involving anti-Western sentiment. Theories blaming external groups like the Committee of 300 or the Trilateral Commission for the fall of the Soviet Union. Those kinds of ideas have persisted and evolved.
It seems widespread. Argentina, too.
Yeah, an interesting case in Argentina where populist leaders apparently use different styles of conspiracy rhetoric, some quite subtle, some very overt, almost strategically, to keep their grip on power.
So it's clear these aren't just harmless ideas floating around. They have real consequences.
Definitely. Sometimes severe consequences. We see links to real-world violence, the Hodgkinson shooting, Pizzagate, but also hindering progress on big issues, like accepting GM foods where they might be beneficial, or tackling climate change effectively. And that harassment of the Fukushima researchers shows the personal toll it can take.
Yeah, that's disturbing. But somewhat surprisingly, the research also mentioned potential positives. How can that be?
It's definitely a more nuanced point, and probably a controversial one.
I bet.
But the argument from some researchers is that sometimes conspiracy theories might encourage a healthy skepticism of power. They might push people to look for information that's being ignored, or empower weaker groups to challenge the status quo.
So, like, questioning authority isn't always bad.
Exactly. It can be a way to test established truths. The danger, of course, is when that skepticism becomes untethered from evidence or reason.
It's a fine line. But too much conspiracy thinking could damage democracy itself, couldn't it?
That's the core tension. You need critical thinking in a democracy. But if conspiracy thinking erodes trust in basic institutions, in shared facts, it makes cooperation and rational debate really difficult.
And what's that point about political tolerance towards people who believe these things?
Right. One source made a strong case for that, saying that how a society treats people with unconventional beliefs, even conspiracy theories, is actually a measure of its democratic health.
How so?
The argument is that protecting free speech, even for ideas most people find wrong or strange, shows a commitment to independent thought. And since conspiracy theorists don't always fit neatly into left-right boxes, tolerating their right to speak is the test of that commitment.
Okay, interesting perspective. Finally, this idea of epistemic authority. What's that about?
It's about who gets to decide what counts as reliable knowledge.
Like experts, institutions.
Exactly. Government, science, established media. These are generally seen as proper epistemic authorities. And the point is, whether something gets labeled a conspiracy theory can sometimes depend on whether these authorities accept it or reject it.
So a theory challenging the experts might be called a conspiracy theory.
Until or unless those same experts eventually come around to validate it.
Ugh.
The label itself can be tied to who holds the power to define knowledge.
Yeah, it's like the gatekeepers play a role in the definition.
In a way, yes. A theory can potentially transition from being a conspiracy theory to just accepted knowledge if it gains that official validation.
Okay, wow, we've covered a lot of ground. Let's try to wrap up the key takeaways.
Sure.
Belief in conspiracy theories is really common, way more than we might think. It's not just one type of person.
Right. And it's complex. It has historical roots, psychological drivers, political uses.
And real impacts, both negative and maybe occasionally in fostering skepticism, like that's debatable.
And crucially, it's not usually about simple irrationality. It often grows out of a mix of individual feelings, social situations, and the political climate.
Okay, so here's something to leave you, the listener, thinking about. Given that this kind of thinking is so common, and maybe even tangled up with useful things like skepticism, how do we manage that? How do we encourage informed trust in necessary institutions while still keeping that critical eye on power? What does the sheer popularity of these theories tell us about how we share and process information today?
It's a big question. And really, this deep dive has just scratched the surface.
Definitely. Hopefully it's given you some tools and perspectives to think more critically about it all.
Yeah, we encourage you to keep exploring, maybe check out some of the research yourself, and just keep questioning the narratives you encounter.